Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Are you dreading the teen-tween years? Or have you been through them? Or are you in the midst of all that drama? Have you ever thought about actually getting to understand what's happening to that teenage brain as it explodes, magnifying all of those thoughts, seeking new and different ways to solve problems, and rebelling against what was previously a parent-run childhood? Time to step back and learn. Let's get curious. Let's look at the science behind the brain. Let's get to know and understand that our role is to facilitate our tweens and teens' journey into adulthood with love and confidence. I'm Kate Mason and welcome to Parenting and Personalities. This is a podcast that connects you to the ones you care about the most. Today I'm welcoming a wonderful guest to the show to share a roadmap for navigating the tween-teen parenthood journey. Nellie Harden is a wife and a mum of 4 teenage girls, podcaster, author and family leadership coach. Nellie's belief is that as parents, we need to transition from building a life for our kids to building a life with our kids in the vital years before they leave home. Being purposeful about the way we parent our tweens and teens can help lay important groundwork that will allow them to flourish in adulthood. Lessons like independence, self-confidence and resilience can all be cultivated, helping to build emotional intelligence in our kids. Hi Nellie, welcome to the show today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh look, it's great to have you with us. There's so much to explore and talk about. My daughter's not a teen anymore or a tween, so I've kind of made it through that part of life. But I've read and listened, and you do so much stuff. So you're the founder of 6,570 Family Project and podcast. And look, everyone that you speak to really wants to know what that bit is all about. So can you just explain that, the 570 to us?
Yes, absolutely. So I call it the 6570 to make it a little bit easier,
right.
Less of a mouthful. But yes, that's how many days we have in 18 years. And so that's about which culturally we have kind of defined as our, younger years and adolescence period. And for us as parents, it's really our runway period for our highest impact zone before they are launched out into the world. And I always say it's not that you aren't going to be a parent anymore, obviously, right? Once a parent, always a parent. And even anyone listening, I say that and I just feel a little bit of remorse because we went through infertility before we had kids. So even if you aren't ever a parent, but you wish to have a parent, you're a parent in a way too. But anyway, that's how many days that we really have in this highest impact zone. And so I wanted to make sure that for our 4 daughters that I was really putting the intention into every day that I could, not to be perfect, because perfection is, that is unattainable. And honestly, trying to pursue that is only going to hurt you and hurt your kids as well. So when I say be intentional every day, I don't mean run yourself ragged in order to show up and, be the Pinterest board every day. I mean, just being intentional in the moments of each day, whether they're good or not so good also. So that's where the 6570 number comes from.
It's fantastic because it really does make you think about the days, because sometimes those days go on for so long when the children are little and you're just thinking, is this ever going to end? So putting a number on it like that, I had never even thought about doing anything like that. I mean, my days are gone now. My 65, 70 days are gone, but I think I did put them to good use. But it's really interesting way of looking at it. And I think it kind of grounds you in the moment of going, well, actually, I do need to enjoy some of this journey as we go along the way type of thing. So where did your journey start to help other parents with your tweens and teenagers? I read about your early start with your husband and being unwell. Could you just tell us a little bit around that?
Yeah. So I feel like everything that we've done in our lives as a family, what we do for our work in our lives, it's come out of a place of need first. We needed it, and then we were able to master it, and then we could turn around and help other people with that as well. And so it actually started a little bit before that with my own personal journey. I was 17 when I left home, and I went off to college. I was a little bit on the younger side. And not to say that that was the only means, but I really didn't have this establishment of a foundation of worth, esteem, and confidence that I was launched into the world with. And I was going along like so many families do. And for good understanding, it's the way that we've been, culturally kind of bred to do. You go to school, you go to college, you get a job, and you have a family, right? And all of this. So we were going along the conveyor belt of life without necessarily the building blocks that needed. And so I see that a lot today, where a lot of, and back when I was leaving home, especially too, a lot of people are released out to, the big world, quote unquote, but they're not launched into the big world. And so I was one of those young women as well. And what happened when I didn't have that foundation is I was really just chasing worth everywhere I could find it. And that's a really dangerous place for a young woman to be when they are going out into the world, especially for the first time, right? So I chased worth in relationships, in school, in serving, in accolades, and anything that I could do that was like, oh, am I worthy enough? Am I worthy enough? And, in hindsight and, with much more wisdom with my age, that enough is never attainable, right?
No.
And so that led me down personally some really darker corridors and consequences that happened as a result of that took decades to heal from. And then in the meantime, I'm going through infertility, like I mentioned, for years. And then I have 4 daughters in 4 years. And so, that is one swing of the pendulum to the other side. And then my husband falls ill, like you were saying, and you had seen. Yeah, he falls ill when my oldest was 4. So I had 4 kids, 4 and under, and he was ill, and we didn't know if he was going to make it or not. He has a heart condition that we had just found out about then. Now we know today that 3 of our daughters also have that. So we've been really proactive throughout their entire life. We just found out this year that they have it, but their entire life we knew it was a possibility. So we've been the fruits and the vegetables and the healthy living and the water, no soda and all the things. So we've been building that throughout their entire lives. And I was like, well, if it turns out they don't, then they have great habits,
That's right. They're going to be really well.
Right, exactly. And so, but anyway, so then almost losing him, and he's still here, by the way. We've been married now for 22 years. And, but going through that experience and having to really have some in-depth conversations with my 4-year-old and my twin 2-year-olds, it was an eye-opening experience and helped me understand that my kids are capable of so much more than just me looking down on them or anything like that, or talking down to them. And I can have real conversations, real relationships to help them prepare for the real world. And so that's really where some of that came from in the waiting room, waiting for my husband to get out of heart surgery. Some really big pieces of this story were born.
So when did you start thinking about the tween-teen years? Was it when your children approached those years, or were you in them and you thought, right, there's a lot of things that I can actually help people with around this, because having 4 girls, yes, you can. So when did that all come about?
Well, So there was definitely the part of me that I needed that during my adolescent period. But here's the thing. In the first half of childhood, so we're talking, birth to about 8-ish or so, you're really spoon feeding life to your children, right? You're telling them,
Wow.
This is what you're wearing. This is where we're going. This is who your friends are. This is who you love, right? This is, give grandma a kiss, like do all the things, right? You're telling them how to do life. And then in the second half of childhood, you're needing to partner with them in order to do life, to set them up to do life on their own after the 65, 70. And so this training zone, this, arena that they're in the second half of childhood is such a moldable time that's really what catches my attention with it. I can have real conversations. There can be a lot of self-reflection, right? That's starting to happen during that time. And they're starting to make decisions on their own, but they're also not quite ready. And the other part of that is there are numerous resources for the first half of childhood. There's much less for the second half of childhood. And I think there's some really powerful arguments to say the second half of childhood is really where, their frontal lobe is being developed. It's where we're laying the tracks that are going to be the rest of their life. And I know the science, I love the science. My background's in biology and psychology, so I get it for the first half of childhood, but there's a lot of resources there. And I really, a lot of parents, because young women look like just shorter, older women, right? It's easy to look at them and say, oh, they're just like me, right? But on a biological level and on a psychological level, they're very, very different. And many parents and many families can just look at these young women and say, oh, they're just younger versions of me and they get it. And I don't understand why they don't understand. I don't understand why they're doing this behavior, etc. Instead of diving into, okay, there's a reason you don't understand because your brain chemistry is and functionality is much different. And so how can we understand and then build in order to prepare them for life?
So do you think that a lot of parents, and I think this is something that we tend to do, is that when they do go through that stage and we're not thinking and we have no knowledge around the brain and the changes, that we actually pull back to a degree because we don't understand it. We don't know how to handle it. And so you actually, the child that really desperately needs you right now, you don't know how to handle that. And what you say with the 5 needs that I want to discuss with you now is so important, because what happens is that we stop looking at them. They feel like we stop loving them. We have not got an understanding. And as one of my guests once said, you need to get curious.
Yes.
And I really like that, because I think most of us don't get curious. We actually pull away and go, oh, this is all too hard to handle. They're just out of control. I can't do this. So I, as a person, when I had my kids, I kind of knew them very well, and I feel like we had a pretty good connection because I think I didn't let them go. But I think some people have a lot harder time too than I did. So what do we need to do really to get in contact with that brain and that person?
Well, I think some of the reason that people are pulling back is because they are we live in an overwhelmed world. And then parenting, let's face it, is an overwhelming task many times. I have twins I'm trying to teach how to drive right now. I am overwhelmed with that. They're 15.
That's just scary.
It is. Every day I have to get in the car for an hour or two with 1 or 2, young women. And I'm just like, So it can be overwhelming. And then we do start to pull back because it's like, it's too much for me to handle. But why we pull back is a fear and this overwhelm. But if we know actually steps to do, so it's a lot easier to say, okay, let's work on this thing, instead of saying, oh, you need to build your child's self-esteem, right? You need to build your child's self-worth. Well, okay, great. But what does that mean?
Exactly.
Where do I start? And so these 5 pieces of worth, I think, are such an important place to start. And this foundation I keep referring to is like a 3-layered cake that is built throughout life, and especially in this this training ground or gauntlet of life that is adolescence, right? In the second half of the 65-70. And you can look at it like a 3-tiered cake. It's worth, and then esteem, which is value and appreciation of self, and then confidence is at the very top, and that is a true belief in self. And we're talking about the reality of these. I'm not talking about inflated egos or inflated esteem. And, some people, think about esteem as I walk into a room and I think that everyone should look at me. That's not what esteem is, right? That's ego speaking right there. That's the world saying you're only worth what you look like, and you're only worth what you can bring to the table. Right? But we're talking about true worth, esteem, and confidence. And so that bottom layer there is filled with the 5 basic needs that you and I and everyone listening has. But in the adolescent period, because this frontal lobe right under your forehead is like this, you can think about sparks flying. It is this massive place of connections being made. That means that these needs that I'm going to talk about are also massively electrified and amplified during this time. So when you think about all the needs or all of the issues that you see with adolescents today, I'm going to challenge you as I'm saying these to really think, is there anything outside of these? And I ask that because I have challenged everybody and we can't think of anything outside of these. So these 5 needs they need to be seen. Right? These kids need to be seen. They need to know they're seen. They need to be heard. They need to know that they are loved. They need to know that they belong. They truly belong somewhere, and that they have a purpose going forward. And so when you look at the opposite end of the spectrum, of all of these, then, we're talking about when they're not seen, they're invisible. And there's a lot of adolescents out there that feel like they are invisible right now. And it causes a lot of issues, a lot of self-worth that just depletes, right? And then if they're not heard, they're ignored, which sometimes can feel even worse because they're acknowledged, but then people decide you're not worthy enough for me to hear your words, right? You don't matter is what that is saying. And then, of course, the opposite of loved is unloved, right? Or even what some might view as hated, right? And then there is the belonging, and the opposite of that is rejected. And then there's purpose, and there's no purpose. And so many kids are like, why am I here? What is my purpose to be here? I have nothing to do. I have nothing to contribute. So why? So I'm just going to hurt myself or hurt others in order to get some sort of attention because I can't get the needs filled that I need, right? And so if we can, as parents, really work on building these 5 needs, and I love to, I come from a inside out. So I come from a place of first faith and then internally and then externally, because you don't want your child to wake up in the morning and say, what will the world define me as today? Right? You want your child to wake up in the morning and say, how can I serve the world today? How can I, give to the world today? How can I learn about the world today? Right? So this inside out versus outside in, which is very contrary to the world that we live in, is really what we have to intentionally, that's where that intention comes in, really intentionally teach our kids, because out there, they're completely learning the opposite, right?
Yes. So as a parent, how do I ensure my child's seen? Because I see them, but how do they know I see them? Because everybody's really different. Everyone's perspective, and I always talk about, your understanding that nobody sees the world the same way as you do. So how someone might feel seen is very different. I might feel like I'm doing the right thing. So do you have conversations around this, with your teen? I mean, is it how can you tell me how I can make you feel? Getting it right into that groundwork of what does it mean to you to be heard? What does it mean to you to be loved, so that you've actually got their perspective, not your perspective. Oh, I'm giving them hugs, they should feel loved. And I mean, I work with a lot of the time with Gary Chapman's, love languages, which, to that degree. And my children, I know how to love. I mean, I know that there's only, the 5 of them, whatever, but we've had the family discussion about that. And I know how to love my children. And it's very differently to the way I love, and I feel loved and they feel loved. I can tell when I do that. So knowing those things, they're just kind of an outer thing, but knowing all of these different things, like actually to be heard, listening to someone properly, so I've only just learned that in the last couple of years. So it's really scary. I'm 61. I'm sitting here going, oh my goodness, I finally worked out how to listen to my husband and my children. Great, excellent. Here we go. So, where do people know and find that knowledge?
Well, first of all, I'd love to say, and I think that's a great example of, it's never too late.
No.
And so, but like I was saying, this highest impact zone where it's going to be literally worked into the chemistry and functionality of their brain, and this foundation that we're building for them is in the 65, 70. But again, it's never too late, right? And so let's just take scene, for example. There's a lot of just super practical things that you can do. And then there's also the more deeper things that you can do. So let's just say they walk into a room. Actually look at them. Use eye contact when they walk into a room and acknowledge that they walked into a room, and use their name. The brain literally kicks off different neurotransmitters when someone's personal name is being used. And so it could look, just one of my daughter's names is Lana. And so, she can walk in the room. I actually look up if I'm cooking or if I'm on a device or whatever that is that's going on. I can look up and say, hey, Lana, how are you? Right? That very, very simple act is me pausing, acknowledging she came in. I see you. I'm looking into her eyes and I'm saying her name. It's so simple, but it's so profound. And it's amazing how many kids walk into rooms all over the world and there's just a, hey, not even looking up, no name, no eye contact, nothing, just hey, or nothing at all, right? And so they can feel, oh, I'm not seen. So another really practical thing you can do is, many of our kids are changing all the time. This adolescence is a constant, turbulent, fast, game of change. And so when they are changing, recognize the change. If your child went and got a new shirt, right? If they went and got a new skirt or whatever that is, oh, that's really nice, right? Notice the changes. Because if you don't notice the smaller things, those things are just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger until you do notice something. And they're screaming internally, sometimes externally, notice me. Just notice me, right? And so those are just some of the practical side that you can do. And then one thing I really, really recommend, I can't recommend it enough, is having one-on-one time with your kids every week. And so it doesn't have to be this huge cumbersome thing, right? And, we have a family of 6. It's my husband and I and our 4 daughters, and we're together a lot. There was 7 years that we homeschooled, and my husband and I both work from home. Mm-hmm. We're home a lot. But when we're all together like that, it's not the same as when you're one-on-one. So in our family, on Tuesdays and Thursday nights from 9 to 9:30, or maybe sometimes it leaks a little later, my husband and I go into 2 of the girls' rooms on Tuesdays, and then on Thursdays we go into the other 2, and then the next week it switches. So my kids know every single week they are going to have one-on-one time with mom or dad.
Yep.
And that has been such a beautiful time to just learn about them and ask those questions like you were saying. Because if you're down sitting around the dinner table or things like that, and you look at your child and say, how can I make sure that you know that you're loved? They're going to look at you and be like, feel so awkward right now. And I'm just going to continue to eat my spaghetti or whatever. And so, but if you are sitting in their space, in their room, and you're just, you're chilling out and you're just sitting eye to eye with them, they know I'm here for you right now. I want to get to know you. They are so much more apt to answer those questions that you have for them. And ask them to, and be vulnerable. Have there been times that I didn't make you feel seen? Because not only do I want to help you feel seen, I need to know when I'm messing up, and I might not know when I'm messing up. So if you could tell me, let me know. And so I can, be better about that for myself. One of the biggest tools that you need in order to build this foundation as a parent and as a child is vulnerability. It is absolutely required. And so having that time, that one-on-one time where you can have that vulnerability, and you know what? What's one of the most beautiful things when we talk about being heard, you can tell them about things that are happening in your life and ask them their opinion and their feedback on things that are happening in your life. And there's so much value that comes from that. And kids are much more wise than we give them credit for.
Oh, they are.
And so, yes. And so if I'm sitting there and I'm saying, I'm just having this issue with, this friend of mine, and I don't really know what to do here. I don't know. Do you have any pieces of advice? And it doesn't matter if they're 6 or 8 or 17, they'll be able to feed in and they'll know, wow, my opinion, my advice actually matters, right? And it doesn't mean you take all of it, but I promise you there will be some that you will, and you'll be like, oh, that's a great idea. But just having their opinion matter opens them up and really builds that bottom of the foundation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. My son gave me his opinion of his sister getting drunk early at one stage, and I was like, oh, score, you're right, actually. And I I turned around and disciplined my daughter. I said, I'm really sorry, but, Jack's right. So here we go. This is not happening. But it is. And I think, like you say, there's that value as well. And I always say to people, listen, you can give advice, but you can't expect that it will be taken. But advice is great, but it doesn't mean people will act on it. So don't ever be offended if your advice isn't taken, but it's really great to have it on board, because it is really important to feel like you're part of a decision sometimes too. And we have many mealtime decisions. We have a lot of mealtime conversations too, because I also find that mealtime, sitting down at a mealtime, for many years it was directing them to eat properly, and then we'd have stomp, stomp, slam, slam, and they'd be off the table. But as adults now, like they're in 30 and 28, we have wonderful mealtimes. So, to those people who don't sit down all together, I also think that's very, very valuable time. It might not seem like that, but as adults, having grown, it's amazing. We have the best time sometimes at our dinner table. So,
yeah, I agree. When we sit down around our table downstairs, we're always, we're going around and we're saying our grace, but we're always so thankful for every meal that we can have as the 6 of us around that table. And then, when it grows off into the future, we'll be so grateful for those too. But just the core of the 6 of us around that table is so precious. And we know that my daughter is going off to college in less than a month now. And so, we know that those are numbered. And that's the beauty of understanding the 65-72. I encourage anyone that's listening that has a child, that's below 18 to, you can do it longhand if you want and figure out the math. I use a computer and I just ask, how many days has it been since their birthday? And then subtract that from 65-70. And that's the runway that you have left. And it might be 10 days. It might be 4,000 days, or it might be longer or shorter, but understanding the runway helps you put things into perspective a lot more. And also it helps you understand I still have that much runway, right? I've heard from several parents back when I was first starting this work, over 10 years ago. And they're like, oh, she's 13. She's practically an adult. So I don't really, speak into her, her decisions anymore. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you still have so much time that you could be helping helping shape what is happening there. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful thing to understand the timeline.
No, it is a great thing. And I do want anyone listening to remember that if you miss the runway, you still can get time back. It's
100%.
You just need to look at your 5 basic needs and get right into those because, you know, to be heard, like for me, to be heard was really, really important, that I actually listen now and I go into their conversation and discuss more with them. Not that we but we have an even better relationship than we had previously. So it was never bad, but it's good. It's even better now. So, Nellie, thank you so much for sharing just what is a tiny part of your expertise. I mean, I just look at what you do and how you're doing it, and I think that it's just you're an amazing resource for so many people out there. And of course, people don't often look for resources. They're busy doing their battle by themselves. So, where can our listeners find you?
Everything can be found on nellieharden.com, and I work all over the world, so that is not a boundary whatsoever. Yep. And so, I like to keep it simple. All of our communities, all of our resources, all of our masterclasses and things can all be found on nellieharden.com.
That's brilliant. And we'll have that below in our show notes as well for anyone that wants to get in touch. And once again, wonderful talking to you. I could talk for hours. There's so much in all of this. And thanks for being on today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Next time you talk, not only to your tween or teen, but any person that you care about, look at them, give them eye contact, speak directly to them. Listen to hear, don't tell. Show curiosity. Work out how they love to be loved. It might not actually be the same as the way you do. Show them that they belong and help them to find purpose in their lives. Fulfilling these needs will build connection and self-worth. And isn't that all we want for our kids? I'm Kate Mason. Thanks for listening to Parenting and Personalities. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could leave a rating and a review. That would help others learn about this podcast. If you're interested in discovering more about you and your family's personality types, you'll find my book, Who is This Monster or Treasure in My House, on Booktopia or Amazon. If you have an episode idea, please send a note to thepersonalitycoach@gmail.com. Many thanks to our producers at Stories and Strategies, and I'll see you next time.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.